My name is June Talley, and I am 35 years old. On Tuesday, September 17, at 1:22 p.m., during Grandma Mae's memorial luncheon at the volunteer fire hall outside Missoula, Montana, my mother sold my house in front of the people who had come to mourn her. The ham sandwiches were warming under foil pans on the long folding table, and the room had that soft, salty smell of bread going damp at the edges. Behind me, the coffee urns hissed and dripped against the back wall, one slow metallic breath at a time. I had Grandma Mae's memorial program between my fingers, and the paper edge was rough enough to leave a pale line across my thumb. My mother stood in front of 167 people beneath a slideshow of my grandmother's life and announced that she had sold the house Mae left to me. Then she smiled at the room and said I had always been too naive to manage real property. Carla Talley did not look at me when she said it. She looked at the room, because rooms mattered to her more than truth did. Her cream wool coat was buttoned at the waist, her red nails were wrapped around the microphone, and her voice was soft enough that the cruelty arrived dressed as concern. I did not move right away. I counted. 3 exits, 1 microphone, 12 tables. 1 resort buyer standing near the back door in polished shoes that had not seen 1 inch of Montana mud. By Friday morning, she would learn that Grandma Mae's porch light had been watching the driveway for 3 years. Welcome back to the channel, where calm stories unfold 1 receipt, 1 witness, and 1 quiet truth at a time. If you are new here and this kind of steady justice is the reason you clicked, subscribe and stay with us. Drop your city and what time it is where you are listening. I love knowing where these stories find people. Now let me take you back to the first time my mother decided my calm voice meant I could not be hurt. I was 9 years old the first time I understood that my mother could make usefulness sound small. It was February, during the winter pancake breakfast at the volunteer fire hall, 8 miles outside Missoula. The snow outside had been packed down by truck tires until it shone gray and hard under the morning sun, and 43 people were inside the hall, shaking off their coats and stamping their boots near the entryway. The floor squeaked every few seconds under wet rubber soles. Maple syrup had soaked through paper plates and left sticky rings on the long tables. Grandma Mae had put me beside the coffee table and told me to stack paper cups in columns of 20 because grown men in suspenders would use 3 cups each if nobody watched them. I liked that job. It had order. It had a number. It had an end. Across the room, my mother stood with 3 women from church, her hair sprayed into a shape the weather could not touch, talking about how someday she would live somewhere with clean sidewalks and restaurants that did not close at 8. She said Montana was a place people got stuck if they lacked imagination. One of the women laughed with her mouth closed. Another looked at me and then looked away. The black rotary phone near the coat rack rang at 9:17. It was a sharp sound, not like the phones at home. It cut through forks and chairs and coffee spoons. Grandma Mae had both hands under a tray of pancakes. Frank Dutton was at the griddle with his back turned. Nobody moved for the first 2 rings, so I answered it. The receiver was heavy and cold against my ear. A woman's voice came through with wind behind it, saying there had been a road slide near Blue Mountain Road, not a big one, but enough to block the east lane. She gave the mile marker twice. I repeated it back the way Mae had taught me to repeat phone numbers. Not fast, not fancy, just clean. Blue Mountain Road, East Lane, mile marker 11, minor slide, no injury reported. I wrote it on the back of a napkin with the stub of a pencil tied to the phone cord. My hands were small, and the pencil left gray dust on the side of my finger. Then I walked the note to Frank Dutton before the adults had finished deciding whether the call was important. Frank read it once, wiped his hand on his apron, and moved toward the radio. Grandma Mae did not clap. She did not make a show of me. She took the note from Frank, checked the address, and said, "That was useful." 5 words. That was enough. My mother heard it. She turned from the women, gave a little laugh, and said, "June likes pretending she runs emergencies. Really, she just answers phones." End quote. End quote. End quote. End quote. The women smiled because Carla had told them how to hear it. I stood there with syrup on my sleeve and pencil dust on my finger, and I learned that some people could watch you do the right thing and still rename it before anyone else understood what they had seen. Mae did not argue with Carla. She folded the napkin once and placed it beside the radio log. Later that morning, when the county road crew called back and said the east lane was clear, Mae wrote the time next to my note in her square handwriting. 9:53. Cleared. That was the first record with my name beside it, though I did not know enough then to keep it. At 17, I learned that staying could be treated like failing if the wrong person narrated it. My high school graduation reception was in Mae's front yard, under the cottonwood trees that dropped white fluff into the potato salad no matter how many napkins Maggie Sloan laid over the bowls. There were 26 graduation cards stacked in a wicker basket on the gift table, and the dry grass scratched against my sandals every time I shifted my weight. The lemonade was too sweet. It coated my tongue and made my teeth feel dull. I had announced, not very loudly, that I was staying in Missoula to train as a dispatcher and help Mae instead of moving away for the bigger city program in Spokane. I remember the porch light being on behind me, glowing early, even though sunset was still an hour away. Mae always turned it on before anyone needed it. Carla held a paper cup at her chest and said, "Some girls leave town. June learned to be comfortable with small." End quote. That sentence traveled across the yard faster than the cottonwood fluff. Nobody asked what it meant to help Mae after her first bad winter. Nobody asked what it meant to know the back roads by county number, or which bridges iced first, or which households had oxygen tanks during outages. Carla had already placed the frame around me. Small town girl, small plan, small life. I smiled because people were watching. I learned that day that my mother did not need to forbid me from choosing something. She only needed to make the choice sound beneath her. At 25, during my first overnight shift at the Missoula County Dispatch Center, I guided an elderly driver through a snowstorm for 18 minutes until a deputy reached him. The headset foam was warm against my ear. Burnt coffee sat in a paper cup beside my keyboard, bitter and old, and I could taste salt at the back of my mouth from the anxiety I kept out of my voice. The driver kept saying he could not see the road signs. I asked him what he could hear. Water. Wind. A cattle guard when he crossed it. That was enough to narrow the road. The deputy found him at 2:46 a.m., cold but alive. The next morning, my mother stirred powdered creamer into her coffee and said, "You always sound so flat. Nothing touches you, does it?" I watched the creamer leave pale spirals across the surface. She mistook control for emptiness. I did not correct her. Corrections wasted air when someone preferred the wrong answer. Grandma Mae understood records before anyone taught me the word evidence. In late November 2019, 2 weeks after her second fall, Mae called me before my shift. It was 6:10 a.m., dark outside, except for the frost blue line over the mountains, and her kitchen smelled like oatmeal, orange peel, and the old cedar drawer where she kept dish towels. She was wearing one of her faded blue cardigans, the one with mismatched buttons, and she had set 3 things on the table: a manila envelope, a handwritten call log binder, a small card with the porch-light camera password. The manila envelope sat square with the table edge. Mae always lined things up. The binder was thick, the cover cracked at the corners, and each page held her handwriting in black ink. Dates, repairs, visitors, late-night knocks, smoke detector batteries changed on April 3. Frank cleared the gutter on June 12. June brought soup during outage, 7:20 p.m., January 9. Carla called, no visit. February 18. Mae tapped the binder once with 2 fingers and said, "People argue with memory. They have a harder time arguing with records." She said it the way other people might say the kettle was ready. I looked at the little card with the password on it. It had been written in all caps, because Mae said lowercase letters looked like they were hiding. The porch-light camera had been Frank's idea after the second fall, but Mae had chosen the angle herself. It faced the driveway and caught the front steps. Not the road, not the neighbors, just the place where people had to decide whether they were coming to the door. I asked her why she had done all this. Mae did not answer right away. She took a slow sip from her mug. I remember the faint clink of her wedding ring against the ceramic, though Grandpa had been gone 14 years by then. Then she told me she had watched Who Came in Storms, who answered the phone, who changed the smoke detector batteries without being asked twice, who stopped by after a late shift and sat in the kitchen, even when there was nothing dramatic to say. She did not say I deserved the house. Mae did not use words like that. She slid the envelope toward me and told me where the deed had been recorded, the 6th of May, 2019. Missoula County, survivorship transfer. The house would be mine when she was gone. I did not cry. She would not have liked that at 10 inches the morning with oatmeal cooling on the stove. I placed my palm on the envelope and felt the ridge of the papers inside. Mae's kitchen was warm. Outside, the porch light cast a yellow cone across the steps, steady and practical. That light had been with me longer than the deed. When I was 12, Mae had worked the volunteer ambulance desk late during a storm that covered the porch rail in ice. I had waited with her until the crew came back, my feet tucked under me on a wooden chair, my hands wrapped around cocoa that had gone lukewarm. The radio crackled every few minutes. The room smelled like wet wool and peppermint from the candy Mae kept in her pocket. At 10:32 p.m., she told me to flip the switch by the front door. The switch plate was cracked at one corner. When I pressed it up, the bulb outside warmed slowly, then threw that familiar yellow cone over the porch steps. Snow moved through it in bright slanted lines. Mae stood behind me and said, "Leave it on for the ones coming home tired." Carla complained every winter that Mae wasted electricity. She would stand in the entryway with her purse still on her arm and say the bulb was on when nobody was expected. Mae replaced the bulb herself. She wrote the dates in her binder. January 4, March 29, October 16, west porch bulb replaced. To Carla, the light was waste. To Mae, it was a signal. At 34, I worked a wildfire evacuation night that taught the county the difference between answering phones and hearing patterns before they became casualties. The first call came at 6:44 p.m., while smoke had already turned the western sky the color of an old penny. By 7:03, 3 radio channels were talking over each other. One deputy was calling out roadblocks near Miller Creek. A volunteer crew was asking for updated maps near O'Brien Ridge. 2 callers gave similar road names, one Pine Draw and one Pine Drop, and both had elderly residents who would not leave without a familiar voice. The dispatch room smelled like hot plastic from the equipment and stale coffee burning at the bottom of the pot. My keyboard had a nick under the spacebar that caught my thumb every 6th entry. I logged 6 calls in 4 minutes, separated the 2 road names, repeated one address back 3 times until the caller corrected herself, and noticed that the nursing home van from Red Barn Lane had checked out but had never checked in at the shelter. That detail was not loud. It was a missing sound. I called Caleb Norris from County Housing and asked him to verify. He said they had 5 residents listed on the shelter roster. The van had 6 when it left. At 8:19 p.m., a deputy found the van in a church parking lot where the driver had pulled over because one resident needed oxygen and the portable tank was slipping. Caleb told me later that my timestamps kept the county from missing all 6 residents during the transfer count. He brought donuts to dispatch the next morning. I ate half of one at my desk while my headset cord dragged across the edge of the console. That was my work. Triage, memory, pattern, timing, not panic, not performance. When Mae's death certificate arrived, 5 days before the memorial, I stood at her front door at 7:12 p.m. with the paper still in my hand. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and old coffee. The porch light was already on because the timer had kept its habit even after Mae's heart had stopped. I touched the cracked switch plate with 2 fingers and did not turn it off. Mae had not only left me a house, she had left me a system of proof. Quiet is not empty. The lie came back to me in the same room where I had first learned to answer a ringing phone. On Tuesday, September 17, at 1:22 p.m., I stood beside the dessert table at the volunteer fire hall while the slideshow clicked through photographs of Mae in her blue cardigans, Mae holding a trout too small to keep, Mae standing under the porch light with a snow shovel in one hand, and a grin that made her look younger than any of us. The projector made a dry clicking sound every 8 seconds. Someone had spilled coffee near the trash can, and the smell had turned sharp against the sweetness of sheet cake frosting. I held the memorial program in my left hand. Carla stepped to the front with the microphone. I noticed her cream coat first. Not because it mattered, but because my work had trained me to notice what did not match the room. Everyone else wore dark sweaters, rain jackets, or old fire hall fleece. Carla wore cream wool in muddy weather, the kind of coat that made other people careful around her. Dennis stood near the side aisle with his old volunteer fire department belt buckle polished bright enough to catch the projector light. He kept clearing his throat, but not speaking. Brooke, my younger sister, had flown in from Boise the night before, and she was twisting one gold hoop earring the way she had since she was 14. Near the back exit, a man I did not know stood in polished shoes with a leather folder tucked under his arm. I counted the room before I understood why. 167 people. 3 exits, 1 microphone, 1 false sentence forming in my mother's mouth. Carla thanked everyone for loving Mae. She thanked Maggie Sloan for the rolls and the coffee. She thanked Frank Dutton for watching over the neighborhood. Then she took a breath that sounded practiced and announced that the old Talley house had been sold to a resort buyer who would finally make something useful of it. The phrase hit the room like dropped silverware. Finally make something useful of it. A fork slipped against a plate near table 4. Ruth Ann Mercer pressed her hand to her throat. Maggie stopped moving beside the coffee urns. Carla went on. She said I had signed because I knew, in my grief, that I was too naive to manage property. She said I needed my mother to handle the grown-up part. She used my grief like a borrowed coat. I did not interrupt. My hands stilled first. Then my breathing slowed. I looked at the polished shoes by the back exit again, then at Carla's folder on the table, then at Dennis's face. His eyes were not on me. That told me enough to begin. 2 days earlier, I had found a suspicious escrow notice in Mae's mail, tucked between a seed catalog and a sympathy card from a woman in Helena. I had not understood all of it, but I understood my own name when it appeared where I had not put it. I had also understood the title company letterhead and the closing date, Friday, 11 a.m. I had placed the notice in a plastic sleeve and made one phone call then, not to Carla, to the number at the bottom of the page. Now, with Carla smiling in front of 167 people, I knew the quiet concern in Robert Hartley's voice had been more than professional caution. At 1:41 p.m., I stepped into the fire hall equipment room. The door closed behind me with a dull metal click. The air smelled like rubber hose, dust, and cold concrete. Coiled lines hung along the wall. A stack of turnout gear sat on a bench, the fabric rough under my fingertips when I steadied myself beside it. I could hear the muffled murmur of the luncheon through the wall, Carla's voice moving in and out of the noise like she still owned it. I called Robert Hartley. He answered on the second ring. I remember that because I counted. Robert was 57, a title attorney in Missoula County, with square wireframe glasses and a voice that made every sentence sound like it had been filed twice. I had met him once, 6 years earlier, when a county easement had tangled with a wildfire access road. He had tapped each document twice before speaking, as if paper behaved better after being warned. I told him my mother had just announced the sale publicly. He did not ask me how I felt. He said there was a sale packet with my alleged signature. The title company had already flagged 2 inconsistencies. First, the signature did not match the survivorship deed Mae had recorded on the 6th of May 2019. Second, the notarization location appeared impossible because the date and time placed me away from that office. Then, he gave me the sentence that changed my pulse. Mae's 2019 survivorship deed gave me sole ownership upon her death. No valid sale could proceed without my authenticated signature. Robert's voice stayed dry. He told me escrow funds were scheduled for release Friday at 11 a.m. If I did not file a formal objection and evidence packet before then, Carla could receive $1, 2M, and the buyer could begin possession steps. He did not say there was plenty of time. He did not say he was sorry. He gave me a list: call logs, camera footage, deed copy, employment timesheet, witness names. I wrote each item on the back of Mae's memorial program with a pen I found beside a box of nitrile gloves. My handwriting was smaller than usual. Outside the equipment room, someone laughed too loudly. Robert told me to document everything I could from the luncheon without confrontation. He said people who announce things in rooms often provide better evidence than people who hide in offices. That was as close as he came to comfort. When I returned to the main room, Carla had already turned grief into a receiving line. She stood near Mae's framed photograph and accepted condolences with one hand on her chest. Her face held a careful softness, but her eyes moved constantly, checking who had heard. who believed, who mattered. She told Maggie Sloan that I meant well, but property required a firmer hand. Maggie did not answer. She held the coffee ladle over the urn too long, and the handle warmed her palm. Carla thanked the buyer, whose name I learned from the folder in his hand, Clayton Reed, 58. She thanked him for honoring Mae's memory by preserving the porch in the new lodge design. The new lodge design was already printed. Glossy mock-ups of Talley Ridge Retreat sat on the memorial card table beside Mae's framed photograph. The house facade had been altered in the rendering. The porch was wider, the windows darker, the front walk lined with stone. The porch light was gone, replaced by black iron lanterns that looked expensive and blind. I photographed the mock-up from 3 angles. Then I photographed Clayton Reed standing beside Carla. Then I photographed the sale summary, half visible in Carla's folder, when she set it down to hug a woman from church. I did not touch the paper. I did not need to. My phone camera caught the top half, including parcel number, purchase figure, and the first 4 letters of my forged name, June. My name looked wrong even in partial view. At 2:08 p.m., I texted Caleb Norris. County emergency housing lease for Mae's house. Need unsigned draft and intent letter. Urgent. He responded 4 minutes later. On it. At 2:19, I asked Maggie Sloan if she could save the memorial sign-in sheet. She looked at my face once, then at Carla, then back to me. Maggie was 52, with flowers still dusted across the front of her black cardigan from setting out the memorial rolls. She did not ask for the story. She folded the sign-in sheets into the church bulletin box and said she would keep them in her truck. At 2:31, I called my supervisor and requested a certified copy of my dispatch log from the day the forged notarization supposedly occurred. She paused for 2 seconds, just long enough for me to hear typing behind her, then asked whether this involved the escrow notice I had mentioned Sunday. I said yes. She said she would pull the system record herself. By 3:05, Carla had told the story 4 different ways to 4 different groups. To the church women, she was relieved that I had trusted her judgment. To Frank Dutton, she was wounded that people questioned a daughter's right to settle her mother's affairs. To Dennis, she was brisk, telling him where to stand and when to stop looking pale. To Clayton Reed, she was almost bright, tapping the glossy mock-up with 1 red nail and saying the porch had potential once the sentimental pieces were cleared. I stood 9 feet away, filling the evidence list 1 item at a time. My work had taught me that panic eats sequence, so I kept sequence. At 4:12 p.m., after the last casserole dish had been claimed and the memorial flowers had begun to sag in their vases, I drove to Mae's house. Rain had made the gravel dark. The windshield wipers clicked at uneven intervals because the old truck had never respected settings lower than frantic. I parked under the cottonwood and sat for 1 full minute before turning off the engine. I counted that too. 60 seconds. Not to gather courage. Courage was too dramatic a word for sitting in a truck with wet cuffs and a folder full of lies. I counted because numbers gave the moment edges. Inside the house, the air was cooler than it should have been. Mae's kitchen still had her blue mug beside the sink, clean and turned upside down on a dish towel. The refrigerator hummed with that low, uneven sound it had made for 12 years. Wind scraped against the screen door, gravelly and dry, despite the rain. At 11:38 p.m., after 7 calls, 3 scanned documents, 2 cups of coffee, and 1 hour of checking dates against dates, I opened the porch-light camera archive on my laptop. The screen glow turned the kitchen window black. I entered the password from Mae's card. My hands were steady until the archive loaded. Then my left thumb began tapping once against the table. Not fast, just enough that I noticed and stopped it. I scrolled backward through footage. Cars turning in the driveway. Frank dropping off salt bags before the first freeze. Maggie bringing cinnamon rolls in a foil-covered pan. Me arriving after late shifts, shoulders rounded, braid hanging down the back of my jacket. Carla appearing twice during hospice, both times in clean shoes, both times staying less than 17 minutes. Then, August 28, 7:14 p.m., the yellow cone of the porch light covered the front steps and the edge of the driveway. Carla's cream car pulled in too close to the house. She got out with a folder held against her chest. Clayton Reed stepped from a dark SUV 28 seconds later. No sound came with the clip, but the body language was clear enough. Carla pointed toward the house. Clayton opened the folder. Carla handed him papers. He flipped through them under Mae's porch light, then shook her hand. The timestamp was sharp in the corner. August 28, 7:14 p.m. I watched it once, then again. Then I downloaded it to my laptop, copied it to a drive, uploaded it to the secure folder Robert had given me, and emailed myself a still image. 3 places. Mae would have approved of 3 places. At 12:16 a.m., headlights crossed the kitchen wall. I did not reach for anything. I knew Frank Dutton's truck by the sound of the engine before he reached the porch. It had a low rattle on the left side that he had been promising to fix since spring. Frank was 68, retired fire chief, Mae's neighbor, and the only person besides me who had a spare key for storms. He came in carrying a thermos of coffee and wearing his cedar-scented canvas coat. He walked with his cane in his right hand, slow but not fragile. The cane tip made a soft rubber knock against the kitchen floor. He did not ask if I was okay. He set the thermos on the table and said, "Tell me what needs lifting." The sentence landed harder than sympathy would have. I showed him the footage. Frank leaned close to the laptop, his face lit blue-white by the screen. He watched Carla hand over the folder under the porch light. He watched Clayton shake her hand. Then he looked toward the front door where the same light still glowed outside, throwing yellow across the wet steps. He told me he had installed the camera after Mae's second fall. He told me Mae had insisted on the driveway angle because she did not care who passed on the road. She cared who came close enough to knock. Then he told me something else. Carla had not visited Mae regularly during the last 2 years. She had called, yes. She had sent photos from Whitefish and articles about retirement communities and little notes about how hard it was to watch from afar. But visits were rare, until hospice. Then Carla had come twice in 9 days. Both times, Frank said, she had asked Mae where she kept deed papers. He remembered, because Mae had told him after the second visit, with her oxygen tube tucked over one ear, that Carla was suddenly very interested in drawers she had ignored for 20 years. I wrote that down. Frank drank coffee from the thermos cap. It smelled strong and slightly metallic. He sat at Mae's table for 43 minutes while I sorted files, and when I apologized for keeping him awake, he looked at me like I had spoken nonsense. At 1:07 a.m., Caleb emailed the county emergency housing lease draft. The subject line read, "Talley Property Emergency Lease, unsigned working copy." Attached were 12 pages and a signed county intent letter dated August 12, more than 2 weeks before Carla handed documents to Clayton. The lease showed what the house had been intended for: emergency housing for travel nurses, wildfire response medics, and county responders during high-need seasons. Not a retreat, not a lodge, not a decorative shell for wealthy visitors who liked mountain air but not local use. I opened the document and saw Ellie Dutton's name in a planning note. Frank's niece, 27, travel nurse, expected arrival in October. I saw Samir Patel listed in a second note, 31, wildfire response medic, seasonal assignment, housing gap identified, Talley property suitable. The house was already becoming useful. Carla had simply not been invited to define usefulness. If this story is hitting close to home, comment "light" below. Not because light fixes everything, but because sometimes it shows exactly who came to the door. Now back to the story. At 1:22 a.m., exactly 12 hours after Carla's announcement, I sent the first evidence packet to Robert Hartley. Deed, escrow notice, camera footage, still image. 90 AMM. Memorial photographs, mock-up photographs, county lease draft, intent letter, dispatch log, request confirmation. Witness list. Robert replied at 1:39 a.m. with 4 words. Received. Continue preserving originals. That was Robert. No wasted warmth. No wasted words. I slept 2 hours in Mae's guest room, under a quilt that smelled faintly of cedar and laundry soap. The mattress dipped on the left because Mae had stored extra blankets under that side for years. At 4:52 a.m., I woke before my alarm and listened to rain tapping the gutter above the window. I did not cry then either. There are moments when crying would be honest, and still not useful. Wednesday became paper. By 8:15 a.m., I had signed a formal objection declaration in Robert's office. His conference room had 6 chairs, a glass table, and a plant in the corner that seemed to be surviving by policy rather than care. The office smelled like toner and old legal folders. Robert tapped the survivorship deed twice before explaining that Mae's recorded transfer was clear. Recorded the 6th of May, 2019. Upon Mae's death, full ownership vested in June Talley. Carla had no authority to sell. The title company would not release funds if the objection was timely and supported. He said timely, the way a dispatcher says, breathing. Necessary. Immediate. Not emotional. At 9:04, my supervisor emailed the certified dispatch record. On the alleged notarization date, I had been logged at my console from 1:52 p.m. to 4:17 p.m. The sale packet claimed I appeared before a notary 38 miles away at 3:10 p.m. At 3:10 p.m., I had been on a recorded emergency call involving a sheriff's deputy patch-in and a stalled truck blocking a rural road. My voice, my ID number, my keyboard entries, and my radio timestamp were all present. Carla had not just forged my name, she had chosen a time when my work could answer for me. That afternoon, Carla called me 11 times. I did not answer. She texted twice. First, a soft message about grief making everyone sensitive. Then, 14 minutes later, a sharper one saying I was embarrassing the family by acting confused about a decision already made for my own benefit. I saved both. At 5:33 p.m., Brooke called from Boise. I let it go to voicemail because I was in the dispatch parking lot, and the wind was pushing dust across the asphalt in little brown sheets. Her voicemail was 42 seconds long. She sounded tired, and behind her I could hear traffic, probably on the connector near her apartment. She said she had believed Mom, because Mom had said I was overwhelmed. She said she had heard something 2 weeks earlier but had not understood it then. Carla had planned to announce the sale at the memorial. She had told Brooke it would be cleaner that way, because June would not make a scene in front of Mae's people. Brooke's voice cracked once at the end. Not enough to make it a performance. Enough to make it real. I saved the voicemail. Then I forwarded it to Robert. Thursday night, September 19. I worked the final hour of my shift with the evidence packet finished, and escrow still scheduled for release the next morning. The dispatch center break room at 10:43 p.m. had the tired smell all break rooms get after dark. Burnt coffee, microwave plastic, old carpet, and rain-damp jackets hung over chairbacks. The vending machine hummed in the corner with 3 rows of chips glowing behind scratched glass. Burnt coffee coated my tongue. The headset had left a shallow ache behind my right ear that pulsed when I pressed my fingers there. My phone lit up on the table. Robert's final email subject line read, "Objection packet ready." I opened it. There were 47 pages in the combined PDF. I read each page on my phone, scrolling slowly while the vending machine hummed. Deed history, signature comparison, certified work log, camera footage stills, county lease intent letter, witness statements, Brooke's sworn statement referenced but not attached for broad distribution. Robert knew what to expose and what to hold. For 6 minutes, I considered letting him handle everything privately. I could have stayed at work Friday morning and let the title company pause escrow quietly. I could have allowed Carla to lose the money without the town seeing the full shape of what she had done. I could have kept Mae's memorial room from becoming a second hearing. The thought had weight. Not mercy yet, just fatigue. Then, I played Brooke's voicemail again. Carla had planned the memorial announcement because June won't make a scene in front of Mae's people. I played it twice. I did not make a scene. I saved the file in 2 places. At 8:07 a.m. Friday, September 20th. Robert called while I was parked outside the fire hall, with Mae's call log binder on the passenger seat. The binder looked heavier in morning light. Its black cover was rubbed dull at the corners. The tabs inside had Mae's square handwriting across them. Repairs, weather, calls, visits, afterfalls, house. My truck smelled like wet wool from my coat and coffee from the travel mug Frank had left on the porch for me at 6:30. Robert told me the objection had been filed. The title company had paused, release, pending review. He would attend the emergency title review meeting at the volunteer fire hall because so many witnesses and signed statements came from that location. Escrow was still set for 11 a.m., unless the documents were accepted in time. His voice was steady enough to be useful. I looked through the windshield at the fire hall doors. Rain ran down the glass in crooked lines. The same building where 167 people had heard Carla rename me now waited with its lights on. I touched Mae's binder once, then I carried it inside. By Friday morning, the volunteer fire hall smelled less like morning and more like wet coats. The coffee urns were back on the same folding table from the memorial, hissing against the wall as if the building had only one way to prepare for trouble. Wet wool hung in the air from rain-soaked jackets. Old smoke lived in the rafters, the kind of smell no cleaning could remove because it had been earned over decades of pancake breakfasts, late calls, and firefighters coming back too tired to speak. Lemon cleaner had been spread too quickly over the linoleum, leaving sharp streaks beneath the softer smell of coffee. Rain ticked against the metal roof in uneven bursts. 91 people returned for the emergency title review meeting. I counted them twice. Not 167 like Tuesday. 91. Family. Witnesses from the memorial. Volunteer fire members. 2 title company representatives. Clayton Reed. Robert Hartley. Maggie Sloan by the coffee table. Frank Dutton near the side aisle with his cedar cane. Ruth Ann Mercer in the second row, silver hair pinned tight. Caleb Norris standing near the front with his broken zipper canvas field jacket and a county folder under one arm. On Tuesday, 167 heard the lie. On Friday, 91 came to hear what records could do after a room had been used against me. Carla arrived at 9:38, same cream coat. This time the collar was buttoned too high, tight around her throat. Her red manicure flashed as she gripped her phone. Dennis followed 3 steps behind her with a paper cup he never drank from. The cup trembled slightly at the rim, though the coffee inside stayed just below the lid. Clayton Reed stood near the side wall with his leather folder. He smiled when Carla entered. Then he saw Robert Hartley. The smile disappeared, came back weaker, then vanished again. I sat at the front table with Mae's binder closed in front of me. The table surface was cold under my palms. Someone had set out a stack of napkins beside the coffee urn, and one corner kept lifting in the draft every time the outer door opened. I watched it rise and fall 9 times before the title representative called the room to order. Carla spoke before anyone asked her to. She turned to the title representative, lifted her chin, and said I was overwhelmed by grief. She said my attachment to the house was sentimental and impractical. She said the responsible choice had already been made. Then she looked toward the room, not directly at me, and polished the blade. June has a good heart, but good hearts do not manage real property. 30s, there it was. Not the exact sentence from Tuesday. Worse, because she had adjusted it for an audience that included legal people. She wanted the insult to sound like concern with a better vocabulary. The room reacted in pieces. Maggie Sloan's hand stilled on the coffee ladle. The ladle hung over the urn, dripping once, then twice, before she set it down with care. Frank Dutton took off his cap and held it against his chest. The movement was slow because of his shoulder, and the fabric made a soft brushing sound against his coat. Ruth Ann Mercer whispered, "Mae would hate this," so quietly that only the 3 people nearest her heard, but the words traveled anyway. Caleb Norris removed his broken zipper jacket and laid the county lease folder flat on the table in front of him, aligning the bottom edge with both hands. Dennis cleared his throat once. Then again, he said nothing. Everyone expected me to defend my feelings. I could feel that expectation in the room, the way callers wait for permission to panic after they have given the address. People wanted grief, anger, a daughter's hurt, something they could recognize and file away as family pain. I opened Mae's call log binder to a marked page and placed it on the table. The page made a soft whisper against the wood. I counted the silence. 1. Carla shifted her weight. 2. Clayton's leather folder creaked under his hand. 3. The title representative looked at Robert. 4. Rain ticked against the roof. 5. My breathing stayed even. 6. Maggie's ladle dripped one last time. 7. Then I looked at Robert Hartley and asked him to identify the title packet. I placed 3 items beside each other. Mae's survivorship deed, the dispatch log, proving I could not have signed in person, a still image from the porch-light footage, Carla and Clayton under the yellow cone of Mae's front light. The folder opened between them. Then I said, I am not here to argue about whether I am naive. I am here to show who signed my name. Pause here. What do you think happens next? A. Carla admits it. B. The buyer walks away. C. Grandma Mae's porch light changes the sale. Drop A, B, or C in the comments, and subscribe if you haven't, because the next 10 minutes are the reason this story exists. Robert Hartley stood. He did not clear his throat. He did not soften the room. He took one step forward, set his wireframe glasses higher on his nose, and tapped the top document twice. The title company has reviewed the survivorship deed recorded on the 6th of May 2019. Upon Mae Talley's death, ownership vested in June Talley. No valid sale can proceed without June Talley's authenticated signature. The submitted signature packet is disputed, and the notarization conflicts with verified county employment records. Carla's face did not change at first. That was the strange part. She held the same public expression for nearly 3 seconds, the one that said she was patient with lesser people. Then the left side of her jaw worked once, stopped. Robert turned the next page. In addition, time-stamped camera footage from the property shows Carla Talley delivering documents to Clayton Reed on August 28 at 7:14 p.m. under the porch light at the front entrance. Those documents appear consistent with the disputed sale packet. The room went still in a different way. Not shocked loud, shocked quiet. The kind of quiet I heard sometimes on emergency calls when people realized help was coming, but the truth of what had happened had finally caught up to them. Carla's red thumbnail scraped against the side of her phone. Once, twice, a tiny dry sound. Dennis's face lost color at the ears first, then across his cheeks. He looked down at his untouched coffee as if it might offer a version of the morning he could still survive. Clayton Reed closed his leather folder slowly. Too slowly. As if quiet could make him less visible, Robert passed copies of the still image to the title representatives. The paper moved from hand to hand. On it, the porch light gave Carla's cream coat a yellow edge. The timestamp sat in the corner, crisp and indifferent. August 28, 7:14 p.m. Maggie Sloan stepped forward first. She placed one hand flat against Mae's memorial photograph, which someone had brought back, and set near the front table. Her palm covered the bottom corner of the frame, not Mae's face. Maggie said Mae kept records for everything. Bulbs, visitors, flour, orders for pancake breakfasts. She said Mae had told her 6 times in the last 2 years that the house was June's, and that Carla knew it. Frank Dutton came next. His cane tip knocked twice against the floor before he stopped beside Robert. He confirmed he had installed the camera after Mae's second fall. He said the angle had been Mae's choice, and that the camera had never been hidden. The porch light fixture held it plain as daylight if anyone cared to look. He also confirmed Carla had come twice during hospice and asked about deed papers both times. Ruth Ann Mercer stood without being called. She was 74, and her silver hair did not move when she did. She asked to see the binder. Robert handed it to her with both hands. Ruth Ann adjusted her glasses, looked at Mae's handwriting, and pressed her lips together for 4 seconds before speaking. She identified the handwriting as Mae's. Then she read the note Mae had written on a page marked House. House to June. Light stays on. Ruth Ann's voice shook on the word light, but she finished the sentence. Caleb Norris opened the county folder. He did not make eye contact with Carla. He spoke to the title representatives. He confirmed that my office had been working with the county on an emergency housing lease for the property before Carla's sale packet. He produced a signed county intent letter dated August 12. He said the intended use was temporary housing for nurses, wildfire response medics, and county emergency workers during shortage periods. He said Ellie Dutton's placement had been scheduled for October. He said Samir Patel was on the response housing list. He said the property had a defined public use purpose before the resort buyer entered the record. Carla laughed then. Not loudly. That might have helped her. It was a small laugh, thin and expensive, the kind people use when they want others to believe a misunderstanding has become amusing. That footage does not prove anything. I was helping my daughter. She asked me to handle it. Robert looked at the top page of the packet. He did not look at Carla when he answered. The record contains no written authorization from June Talley granting you authority to negotiate, sign, deliver, or represent sale documents for this property. Carla's mouth tightened. She was grieving. She was confused. I have carried this family for years. Robert turned one page. The alleged notarization states, June Talley appeared in person at 3:10 p.m. at a location 38 miles from the county dispatch center. Verified employment records show June Talley was logged into recorded emergency communications from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., including a sheriff's deputy patch-in during the alleged notarization hour. Carla's hand moved to her coat collar. She touched the top button but did not undo it. Then she changed shape. Not physically, socially. She turned toward Dennis. That was when I knew she was looking for someone else to become useful. Dennis held the paper cup with both hands. Carla said he knew how hard she had worked after Mae got sick. She said he knew I had always let others handle complicated things. She said I was punishing her for wanting a life after years of caring for Mae. Dennis's throat moved. Once. Twice. He did not speak. Brooke was not in the room, but her statement was. Robert laid a sealed page on the table and said the packet included a sworn statement from Brooke Talley, confirming that Carla planned the memorial announcement before notifying June of the sale. He said the statement would not be read publicly in full because portions were not necessary for the title decision. That was Robert again. Precise. Institutional. He did not make Brooke bleed in a room to prove Carla had carried the knife. Carla's eyes flashed then, not at Robert, at me. For the first time that morning, she looked directly at my face. I could see the old accusation forming. Ungrateful, cold, small, daughter who would not perform daughterhood correctly in public. I spoke before she could dress it up. My mother did not help me sell my house. She tried to sell it before I could object. My voice did not rise. It did not need to. Clayton Reed shifted along the wall. The title representative asked whether he had been aware of the ownership dispute at the time. Documents were exchanged. Clayton opened his folder, closed it again, and said he had relied on representations made by Carla. Robert's answer was one sentence. Reliance does not create authority where no authority exists. Clayton looked smaller without his smile. Carla tried one more path. She said the house would have been improved. She said Talley Ridge Retreat would honor Mae by bringing visitors, money, and attention. She said no one could expect an old woman's house to sit frozen in time because a granddaughter could not grow up. At that, Frank Dutton turned his head. Not much, just enough that Carla saw him. He did not raise his voice either. He said Mae's house had kept more people warm than Carla's plans ever would. The room changed after that. Sometimes it takes one practical man with a cedar cane to say the thing everyone else has been circling. Maggie reached for Mae's photograph again and straightened it by half an inch. Ruth Ann closed the binder gently, like it was a sleeping child. Caleb slid the county lease folder closer to the title representatives. Dennis sat down without being asked, his untouched coffee still in his hand. The title representatives withdrew to a side table with Robert for 11 minutes. I counted those too. During the first minute, Carla stood with her shoulders back. During the third, Clayton took a call outside and did not return. During the fifth, Dennis put his cup on the floor between his shoes. During the seventh, Maggie carried the coffee ladle to the sink and washed it, though nobody had asked her to. During the ninth, Ruth Ann reached across the aisle and touched my sleeve with 2 fingers. During the 11th, Robert came back. The title representative announced that escrow release was stopped pending investigation of the disputed signature packet and authority issues. No funds would be released at 11 a.m. Emstard, no possession steps would proceed. The buyer would be notified formally through counsel. The clock on the fire hall wall read 10:26. 34 minutes before Carla expected $1, $2M to become hers. Carla did not speak right away. That silence was not dignity. It was calculation, without enough numbers left to use. Then she said this was humiliating. Not false. Not unlawful. Humiliating. I looked at Mae's binder, at the porch light still, at the title documents, at the people who had come back to hear what Carla had hoped would be too messy to challenge. I said, I came here with enough to stop escrow, challenge the forged packet, and ask for immediate removal from every part of the property. Carla heard only the threat. Dennis heard legal debt. The room heard something else. A door I had not opened yet. I had more power in that room than my mother had meant to give me. I had enough records to take the house back cleanly, enough witness statements to isolate her, enough proof to make every future room harder for her to enter with her chin lifted. But power is not the same as noise. At 10:41 a.m., Robert received confirmation from the title company's main office. Escrow stopped. Funds frozen. Sale halted. Clayton Reed's offer suspended. Carla's version of the family no longer controlled the room. Records speak after people perform. After the title representative read the decision, the fire hall did not erupt. That is not how real rooms settle. People looked down. They folded programs that were not there anymore. They adjusted coats. They studied coffee cups. A few whispered. Maggie began gathering napkins into a neat stack, though the stack was already neat. Frank stood near the wall with his cap in both hands. Caleb checked his phone and sent one message, probably to his office. Carla stood by the front table, pale under her careful makeup. The red of her nails looked harsher now. Robert asked whether I wanted him to proceed with immediate removal demands related to the back cottage. He asked it softly, but not privately. Carla heard. Dennis heard. Ruth Ann heard. The cottage sat behind Mae's house, small and drafty, with a tin roof and one narrow bedroom. Carla had moved into it during Mae's hospice period, calling it practical, though she had never paid rent and had never asked my permission after Mae died. I could have asked for immediate eviction. I could have asked Robert to pursue legal costs against the retirement deposit Carla had placed with the luxury community near Whitefish. I could have blocked her buy-in completely and let the community learn why her money had frozen. I could have asked for every lock changed by noon. Those options were legal. Some of them were deserved. That did not make all of them necessary. I looked at my mother. She was not crying. Carla did not cry when witnesses could misread it. She looked offended first, like the room had failed to keep its place. Then, beneath that, I saw something more honest and less polished. Confusion. She did not understand why I had not already used every tool. Robert waited. I said I would offer a written 1-year lease for the back cottage at below market rent. Carla blinked once. The room stayed quiet. The terms were simple because mercy becomes dangerous when it is vague. Carla would return the buyer's deposit. She would repay my legal costs in monthly installments. She would sign a statement, withdrawing all claim to the house. She would have no direct contact with Clayton Reed or any resort buyer about the property. All payments would go through Robert's office. All property questions would go through Robert's office. There would be no private hallway conversations, no surprise visits, no documents carried under porch lights. Carla stared at me as if I had insulted her more by offering shelter than by exposing the forgery. You expect me to live in the cottage like a tenant? Her voice was low now, not soft. Low. I answered, no. I expect you to live there like someone who was not left outside. That was the mercy. Not softness, not forgetting, not handing back the house she had tried to sell from under me. A roof, a door, a year to decide who she was without $1. 2M, and a polished story about escaping small-town life. Carla looked toward Dennis, but Dennis had nothing left to provide. His face was gray, and his hands rested open on his knees. He looked older than 64 inches that moment, not because of his stroke, not because of the debt, but because silence had finally become visible on him. Robert told Carla she had 72 hours to review the lease with independent counsel. She laughed again, but it was weaker now. Independent counsel cost money. So did lies that reached escrow. 6 days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Not from Carla, from Dennis. End quote. Carla. End quote. Carla. 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 The envelope was plain white, my name written in his blocky hand. The paper inside smelled faintly of cigarette smoke from his truck, even though he had told all of us he quit after the stroke. I read it once at Mae's kitchen table. The morning sun had not reached the windows yet, and the refrigerator hummed the same uneven note as it had the night I found the porch-light footage. Dennis wrote that he should have spoken when Carla said I signed. He wrote that he knew she had been asking about Mae's deed drawer. He wrote that Carla had promised to pay off the remaining medical debt from his stroke recovery if the sale closed. He did not use that as an excuse. Not in the final version, anyway. I could tell from the scratched-out lines that he had tried to write it that way first. The first draft had been defense. The second draft was confession. I carried the letter to the porch and read it again in the morning air. Pine damp, coffee cooling in my hand, a truck passing on the road with a loose chain rattling in its bed. Then I placed the letter in Mae's call log binder, under a new tab labeled After. I did not call him that night. The next morning, at 8:20 a.m., I texted him 7 words. I received it. Tell the truth sooner next time. 3 weeks later, Brooke drove from Boise. She asked to meet at a diner west of town, the one with sticky vinyl booths and toast that always smelled burnt even when it arrived pale. She wore gold hoop earrings and twisted one of them so many times in the first 5 minutes that her earlobe turned pink. She apologized for believing Carla. Not all at once. Apologies that arrive too polished can feel like another performance. Brooks came in pieces. She said she should have called me when Carla mentioned the memorial announcement. She said she had wanted to believe there was a version of the family where nobody had done anything unforgivable. She said she had been tired of being the daughter who lived away and missed the small clues. I stirred my coffee twice, though it did not need stirring. The spoon clicked against the mug. I told her, I am not ready to hand you the old version of me. Brooke nodded. Her eyes filled, but she did not make me manage the tears. We sat for 37 minutes. She ordered toast and did not eat it. I drank 2 cups of coffee I did not want. When we left, she did not ask to come by Mae's house. That was enough for one morning. 6 months changed the shape of the damage, but it did not erase it. Carla lost her luxury retirement community deposit near Whitefish and withdrew from the social circle she had been courting with stories about fresh starts and property wisdom. She remained in the back cottage under the lease. She paid on the 1st of each month because Robert received the checks, not me. She stopped calling the property the old Talley house. The first time she referred to it as June's property in writing, Robert forwarded me the email without comment. Dennis sold his second truck to pay down the medical debt Carla had used to keep him quiet. He began volunteering at the fire hall again, mostly cleanup after events and maintenance work nobody applauded. He was no longer asked to make announcements. Frank Dutton still nodded to him when they passed near the coffee urns. He did not clap him on the shoulder. Brooke came back twice, once in January, once in March. The first time, she brought Mae's old recipe tin from a box Carla had kept. The second time, she sat with me on the porch for 22 minutes and did not ask more from the silence than it could give. She still twisted her earrings when she was nervous. She was learning to stop filling every gap with Carla's version of the room. Ellie Dutton moved into the main house under the county emergency housing lease with a chipped green thermos, always in her bag. Samir Patel arrived 9 days later with a red paracord bracelet and 2 duffel bags. They came home at odd hours, boots muddy, faces tired, voices low because people who work emergencies learn the value of not waking a quiet house. The place became useful without being sold. Caleb Norris helped finalize the Wildfire Resilience Grant Package, bringing the property's protected value and public use resources to $4.08. He delivered the final binder himself, broken zipper still hanging from his canvas jacket, and set it on Mae's kitchen table like an offering. I kept working dispatch. My voice remained calm. The town heard it differently after that. I did not become loud. I became harder to mislabel. The porch light stopped being evidence. That mattered most. For a while, I could not look at it without seeing the still image from August 28, Carla's cream coat under the yellow cone, Clayton Reed's folder open, the timestamp in the corner. A lie caught because Mae believed tired people deserved a visible step, and because she understood that records outlast rooms. But objects can return to their first purpose if you let them. 6 months later, at 5:47 a.m., I stood by Mae's front door before an early shift. The air smelled like wet pine and coffee. The switch plate was still cracked at one corner, the same crack my thumb had known since I was 12. Outside, the driveway was dark, except for the faint silver line where rainwater had gathered in the gravel. Ellie was due back from a 12-hour hospital shift. Samir's truck was already gone for a wildfire response training 42 miles east. I heard tires on the road before I saw headlights turn in. I flipped the porch light on. The bulb warmed, then spread its yellow cone over the steps. Ellie's car rolled into the driveway, and through the windshield I saw her shoulders drop when she saw the light. Not dramatically, just enough. A body recognizing it had reached a place where it could stop bracing. The light had recorded a lie once, but that was never its real job. Its real job was to help tired people find the steps. Porches know who belongs. If this story stayed with you, like the video and subscribe for more calm stories about family truth, quiet proof, and justice that does not need shouting. And in the comments, write pork if you have ever protected a place, a memory, or a promise that someone else tried to take.